So this is tutorial 4 of essay writing, how to get higher grades for your writing, and I'm going to concentrate on quotes. Now, quoting anything is always seems a bit challenging for undergraduates and those at third level education, because the temptation often is to quote in some detail, to give quite long quotes, because then those quotes are, say, from other historians or other writers about the topic that you're dealing with, and they often say it better than you can, or they can say it it gives authority to your essay if you're quoting established academics actually writing about the topic that you're trying to cover. Well, that's okay to an extent, but if you have very large quotes and they're just surrounded by short pieces by yourself, then for an examiner it looks like what I would term a cut and paste job. That is, you just sort of gone into the books, cut out paragraphs, laid them down on a piece of paper, glued them to a piece of paper, and added written little bits around them to paste it all together to make a sort of a hodgepodge of an essay which has got a whole load of quotes but not much of your own work. At undergraduate level, you certainly want to show your own analysis, to demonstrate your own knowledge, but also, of course, make sure that you can back up your points by quotations. Now, of course, there's two main types of quotation. There's quotation of actual material created, a primary source created at the time, and then there are secondary sources, which are those written by historians and other commentators, or reviewers of books or poetry or whatever it is that you're writing about. So you have to distinguish between the two, and you want to avoid over quoting. Now, that's what I try to do in this essay. Let's have a look and see if I can find some quotes. Well, there we are. There's a quote, but that's in double inverted commas. Milton is talking about chief of men, so he obviously said that's all my quote is, just 3 words. Let's have a look here. So it's quoted from the poetical works of John Milton, sonnet number 16, which is his ode, or rather his sonnet, Ode to the Lord Protector, and it was this particular translation was published in London in 1889, so it's an old book. And then we've got up here another quote. Look, here's another reference. Let's have a look there, and this is referring to, this is a secondary source. This is Adamson, who's writing about Oliver Cromwell in the Long Parliament in a collection of essays edited by Morrell, Cromwell and the English Revolution. That was published in London in all those years ago. My goodness, 1990 it is. Dates me. So there's 2 different types of reference here. We've got a reference to a primary source, which is chief of men, Milton, John Milton, writing at the time, and then we've got a reference here to a secondary source. So this is a primary source and this is a secondary source, and the secondary source is, I've referenced it there because much of what I'm saying here is simply what is covered by Adamson in his essay Oliver Cromwell in the Long Parliament, or an aspect of it, which I've just reworded, put in my own words. But because it's not my own original thought, I've referenced it to where I got it from, which is, there we are, Adamson. So that I'm showing that although I put it in my own words, it actually comes from somebody else, but it demonstrates that not only have I read this secondary source, but I also understand it because I know how to put it into my own words, and really just to summarize what's been going on in this particular area of the Long Parliament. I mean, this applies to a whole range of other disciplines, of course, to, for example, sociology, law, literature of various types. So these are general points that I'm making about the use of sources. But here, because this is all mine, as it were, this sentence here, except for this quote, and the only thing I have to reference here is the quote itself, which is why I'm quoting the primary source, a collection of John Milton's poetical works published in 1889. So let's have a look and see what else we can find in the way of references. Well, quotations and references, there doesn't seem to be many here. I seem to be just writing away. Let's see about this one here. Well, this is another and it's again in Moral. This is another essay of Cromwell and his approach to Scotland and Ireland. So again, at least one of the points in this I've drawn from this essay, and I've rewritten it in my own words, but I've referenced it there to show that it's not my own idea, it's just my own writing. And I suspect this is probably the same. Yes, that's the same. And if you don't know what IBID, OPSIT, and CF, and those sort of functions are, then I'm going to come back to that in the next tutorial when I show you how those references look. And again, here I can't see any direct quotations, but that there is a secondary source, Canny, quite an old book now. And over here, let's have a look here. It's the same book, Ibid. Here's another one, published in 1977. My goodness. Scotland's relations with England, a survey to 1707. So there we are. That is actually some information about the taxation of Scotland, and indeed I referred it to Ireland as well. How are we doing here? Aylmer, that's in a collection of essays. So still, I'm concentrating on secondary sources, which is demonstrating to the examiner that I've done the reading, I've done the background reading to the essay, and I'm picking up ideas from it, and I'm using them in my essay, but I am crediting them to the people who I've read, which is the correct thing to do in the academic world. It's somebody else's idea, it's not yours. So you should credit it, I suspect, down here as well. There we are, Cromwell's Ordinances, that's also in Aylmer. And also note that quotations I've used double quotes, double inverted commas, but where I'm referring to, where I've got a word which I'm using almost ironically, that this was a radical godly minority, because that's what that minority saw itself as, and I'm not necessarily agreeing with that, so that's why I'm using single inverted commas. And the reference there, look, there we can see it's another secondary. Right the way down, I don't think I use many direct quotations here. So in other words, this is all my own work. It's not simply putting in a slab of quotation, double inverted commas at the beginning of the paragraph and at the end, and cribbing basically it from somebody else. It might be relevant, but find other ways of doing it. Put it in your own words, and then credit the original author with a reference, so that you can show the examiner, the essay marker, that you've read the work and you also understand what it all means. Anyway, these are all secondaries. I think. I don't think there's very many that aren't secondaries. There we are. The Peace Party in single inverted commas, because that's how it's named by some historians. So we can't really call it a peace party. It wasn't really a party. Maybe they wanted peace, but it would be incorrect just to use the term just without that, to indicate that it's a later definition of them. And similarly with Presbyterians here. What else have we got? There's another reference, but again, you see we're citing third parties, secondary sources, but we do have some quotes. We've finally got onto a quote, and we're getting towards the end, and this is the longest quote that I've included here. And again, I'm just quoting from Milton, because I think it was a great ode, and it was really fitted in well with this essay. So I thought, yeah, let's use a bit of that. And there we have, look, peace hath her victories no less renowned than war. So it's because I'm stressing through the whole essay, because I'm answering how Cromwell achieved settled government in Ireland and Scotland, but not in England, that it's not the warfare, it's his activities as an administrator. Peace hath her victory. So that's why I selected that. And I'm sure this is the quote from, yes, there we are, look, there's Milton again. And also, further on in the ode, I couldn't resist this. He sings sweetly, or rather Cromwell said this, sorry, where did he say this? Well, it's cited in one of the secondary sources. He sings sweetly that sings a song of reconciliation, and reconciliation is one of those points that I wanted to make in the essay, to demonstrate the way in which Cromwell achieved some form of settlement across the three kingdoms. So all of the quotes that I've used, and there's not many of them, the quotes from primary sources, are limited and precise. The secondary quotes, secondary sources, I've tended not to quote them directly, but instead just simply collate their ideas or condense their ideas into a sentence of my own, but demonstrate to the examiner that I've lifted it from somewhere else. It was somebody else's idea which I agree with. So I think that's an important aspect. Those are important aspects to remember when you're doing quotes, and you're going to reference them correctly. And in the next short tutorial, I'm going to show you what those references look like and the sort of nuts and bolts of laying them out correctly for your essay. So I'll go into the view mode here. Where are we? That's this one, isn't it? See it, print preview. There we are. And we're going to have a look at these.